The views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you ready?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olson.
Yeah, I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me.
Eric Olson.
And the beautiful and talented Dr. Clarissa Cole is with us tonight, of course. And now we're actually going to pop the cork on this. We did talk about the first killer, the first case that was chosen, and that was Mr. Michael Myers, of course, of Haddonfield, Illinois. And he comes to us weighing in a grand total of 260 pounds, standing at 6'4", and nothing but fury and muscle. Okay, and now I made it sound like we're in for a prize fight. Give us the rundown of Michael. I mean, what's his childhood like? I mean, what brought him to this point?
Well, all I know is that he was born into, looks like just kind of a regular middle-class family in a suburb in Illinois. He had one older sister named Judith, who was 11 years older than him, and eventually one younger sister named Lori. So, middle child. His upbringing seemed like it was pretty quiet in kind of a, normal sort of suburb, but the weird part, I think, about Michael Myers' story is that he stopped communicating verbally. He was mute. They describe him as being mute for about 6 months before his first crime happened when he was 6 years old, right? And this is something in psychology that we call selective mutism.
Really? So he was born October 19th, 1957, and he didn't kill until what year was his first murder?
October of 1963.
So he was mute, like you were saying, 6 months before he did his first crime. How old would that have made him? He must not have been very old.
He was 6 years old.
Jeez, he's already wielding a knife?
Yeah.
Who did he kill?
He killed his older sister, Judith.
At 11 years old, you would have thought she would have been able to fight off a toddler.
No.
She was like 17.
Oh,
yeah,
17,
she was
rather.
17.
She was 17.
6.
Wow, you would have thought that it would have been a no-brainer, just kind of paste the kid to the wall and be done with it.
You'd think so, but I think she was kind of, she was unaware. And so what happened, I guess, was that on Halloween, he went to his schools, he had a costume competition sort of thing. He was a clown because, why not? And he went trick-or-treating with his friends, came to his own house where Judith was supposed to be babysitting.
Okay.
The younger sister, Lori, who was only 2, all right?
Yeah.
So, or around there. Lori's very young. And instead, Judith had her boyfriend over. So when young Mike... he got upset,
It made Michael very angry. And especially if they were up to no good, if you know what I'm saying.
It looks like they were up to no good.
Yeah.
So this made him really sort of lose it. And once the boyfriend left, Michael was, kind of simmering and raging, came back home, and his sister was sort of unaware, I think, of his presence. He put that clown mask back on, got a butcher knife from the kitchen, went upstairs, and stabbed her.
Wow, at 6 years old he did this.
Yes.
Wow, that's really quite amazing that he'd have the upper body strength to penetrate the skin at 6 years old.
That's a very good point. See, that's what's good about fictional killers. It's like I don't see it happening, but you never know.
I'm just saying, at 6 years old, the arm just is not a very strong thing yet. But so he finds the girl doing the hanky panky, kills her off. Does he ever kill the boyfriend, or does he get away, or is this after they've done the deed? Then he kills her.
This is after.
Okay, so he never actually gets the boyfriend either. Okay, I tell you. Well,
Mom and Dad were out. But the point of weird point here is Mom and Dad, I guess, were out seeing Psycho, the movie which had been released that year.
Yes, also known as the Myers Family Tree. Grandpa Myers killing people in the shower. No, I'm kidding.
And so they come home to find him, essentially holding a bloody knife after killing his sister, and he ends up going to a mental hospital.
How long does he spend in this mental hospital?
15 years. So, after a decade and a half, he escapes at 21 years old.
So he's out of there, man. How did he escape, though? I mean, mental hospitals are generally pretty locked down. There must have been something that, gave him opportunity, if you know of it, afforded him opportunity to escape. Did he kill anyone on the way out of the mental hospital?
I think he did, didn't he? Wasn't it like a transport somewhere?
Yeah, well, it depends on which version we're talking about. We're talking about John Carpenter, or are we talking about Rob Zombie?
John Carpenter.
Okay, because they were totally different stories in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
He did kill, I want to say, yes, like a transport person or what have you, to get away. And, of course, Dr. Loomis is hot on his trail after this happens, but that's down the road a little bit. So, okay, Michael's on the run. He gets out of the insane asylum. Does he lay low, or does he start killing?
Well, we should also mention, by the way, that this escape occurred on the day before Halloween. So the original murder was on a Halloween 15 years before, and this is what in psychology would be known as an anniversary effect.
Is there a lot of anniversary killings in psychology?
It's not necessarily anniversary killings, and this is going to be morbid, but there are a lot of anniversary suicides.
Yeah. You're right. A lot of people die. Christmas is a big one. That people
exactly. Whenever they've had sort of a loss, holidays are big time. I used to be the suicide prevention coordinator at San Quentin, and holidays were always big times for suicide, and the other was the anniversary of the person's crime. So whenever we were watching somebody for suicide, we wanted to know when their crime occurred and start watching them at a few weeks before then.
Yeah, because then they'd either feel, I suppose, they'd have remorse or what have you, and have a hard time living themselves with that date looming.
That's exactly right. But Michael Myers...
No, he don't care. No, Mikey don't care.
He had no problem with it.
No, Mikey likes to kill.
He does. So he escaped, and then depending on which movie you're watching at this point, not just the first one, he goes on a full-on spree of killing.
Yeah, well, he had quite a body count in that movie.
Yeah.
It was pretty graphic.
I think was it 15 in the first one?
Let me go to Google.
I don't think it was that many. It was basically Laurie's, who is now grown up, and we did not know in that first movie that Laurie Strode was in fact his sister. We didn't learn that till later
Here
on.
is the dossier of who Michael Myers killed while he was on a spree.
In Halloween 1?
In Halloween 1, John Carpenter film. Judith Meyer, stabbed to death after her boyfriend left. A mechanic, stabbed to death by Michael Myers. On-screen death, no. He needed a vehicle, so he killed him to get it. Okay, he kills, get this, number 3, and I find this totally appalling, a stray dog. But then he ate it. Corpse was discovered by Dr. Loomis and the sheriff's department in the empty Myers home.
Oh my!
Then he killed Lester. The Wallace's dog by strangling it. He had a hatred of dogs, evidently.
It would appear.
He was not a canine lover. It was in the back of the garden trying to warn Annie Brackett and protect his owner from Michael, but Michael took it upon himself to strangle the dog.
I was just gonna say that I don't think it's a hatred of dogs. The biggest reason that people that commit crime kill dogs is to not be discovered.
Well, yeah, because there's early warning systems. The dog starts barking. What are you gonna do? Let it bark, or throw a stake at it, or kill it?
And they're dangerous.
They are. In the movies, they show them throwing stakes at him. There you go, dog. There you go. That never actually works, by the way. That does not work. So. A dog that is vigilant to protect its family, that does not work. No, it will not chase the stake. It'll chase you, but not the stake. By the way, I had an interesting conversation with Steve Asher last night about me eating an eyeball, but that's a whole other story.
Well, I have done that too. That's odd.
Yeah, it was a beef eyeball.
A what?
A beef eyeball. It was a cow eyeball.
How was it?
It was really kind of like a grape.
Yeah, mine was a pork eyeball.
Yeah, so it was in Texas, and it was a rite of passage that this particular Texas steakhouse, and I know I was told I went over the line last night with the story, so I will not give a gory detail, but it wasn't as bad as it looks.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Mine was not as bad either.
I'll tell you, I have not done that. I've eaten sheep gonads.
Well, that's high mountain oysters. That's
Exactly.
what that is. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. But anyhow.
And did you know that Errol Flynn's first job was, they used to have to do this manually. The quickest and most sanitary and supposedly least painful method of castrating sheep was to bite them off.
What? You just walk up there, your choppers, and start going to town on them?
Errol Flynn's first job was biting the gonads off sheep.
No way.
Way.
Can you imagine having that job? What do you do? I'm a ball biter. I mean, jeez.
All right, so do you want to be one of the most famous and handsome men in Hollywood, or do you want to keep biting the balls off sheep?
Let me think about that for a minute. I do like the perks.
I think I'll grow the mustache and become a pirate.
I do like the perks of biting the balls. But, I really want to become a pirate. Let me weigh that one for a minute. Okay, I'll become a pirate. Okay, Annie Brackett, she died at the hands of Michael Myers. Her throat slashed with a butcher knife, of course. She was in the car about to pick up Paul, and I'm just running down his victims so we can kind of ascertain how many. Now, victims in the original Halloween, they only have 7 listed as victims.
Okay.
And so, really, that seems like a really light body count compared to, like, a Jason Voorhees.
Mm-hmm.
Where that's the whole movie is nothing but one big, kill fest.
Well, one of the big reasons, one of the big citations of all of the various critics who love the movie. I mean, that's one of the best reviewed horror movies ever, of the original Halloween, and that was one of the things that they cited was the relative lack of body count, and it was relatively bloodless.
Well, relatively for the time, yeah, absolutely. The Rob Zombie's version, of course, was a much different tale. Much darker Michael Myers, if it could get any darker, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And more explicit.
Way more explicit. Went over the top in some ways. But Michael Myers, okay, now we ascertained he killed 7 people in his first rampage, because there was 2 rampages before he was really dealt with. But the first one, he killed 7. Now, when they were after Michael and they were stalking him, what tactics were used to get him? I mean, how'd they lure him out in the open?
Well, the doctor was kind of hunting him down, correct? Dr. Loomis?
Yes, Dr. Loomis.
Yes, I am less familiar with that. I'm trying to remember. I have not seen the movie in a while, so I might need some help on this one.
Okay, well, Dr. Loomis basically comes up and he says, Michael was my patient. I love that boy. I don't think he ever said he loved him, but he did have a deep, deep fondness for him. I will find you, Michael. I will find you. And so he set out to find him, and he ended up going to Haddonfield, Illinois, which is a small town America, middle America, where you would not think a psychopathic killer would be.
Oh, because he knew he would return there, right?
Yes. Yeah. He should have thought that right away. He will be going to Haddonfield. In fact, he says that in one of the lines. Where do you think he's going, Doctor? Haddonfield. Oh, okay. Sounds good to me. And that was about it. So Dr. Loomis, a frail old man at this point, shows up to chase down the psychopathic killer that stands about 6'5" and probably about 280 pounds. And the only thing he has is a snub-nosed .38 revolver, and that's it. And running around and not really catching Michael. And a lot of points, I don't think you really want to catch Michael. I think it was more, they give me a paycheck. I suppose I should act like I'm chasing him.
I'll pretend. Well, even in that very first one where he was more human than he became later, he still went flying off that balcony, remember?
He did.
And landed, at least 2 stories below, and he was gone after the fact. All right, so having described his rampage, and of course his number one target turns out to be his younger sister, his baby sister, Lori, now known as Strode, but who is in fact Lori Myers. And so what I'm really interested in hearing, since we only have actually 11 more minutes in this half hour, what is your analysis, Clarissa?
Well, I found it really interesting that he was, going back after his family and that he had the selective mutism. So selective mutism, if it is not caused by a language deficit. So some kids that develop this selective mutism where they just stop talking. So they have the ability to because they're old enough to and they have before, and then all of a sudden they become mute. A lot of kids that develop that is because they have an actual speech problem like a lisp. Something that is impairing them and they're getting teased by peers. Sure.
So they'll just shut up instead of talking. I'll just be quiet now. That way I don't get teased.
Exactly. Or, if their parents are very punitive, some parents make fun of their children when they can't speak correctly. So
that's mean. Who'd ever do that?
Well, yeah, it happens. So that's why we see selective mutism too. But another reason selective mutism happens is because there is abuse in the home.
Yeah.
And the child can't talk about it or feels like they can't talk about it, or they're actually afraid of their caregivers.
Well, some selective mutism would be nice in my house, let me tell you.
A lot of people wish for that, yeah.
My 2-year-old is a chatterbox. Even talks in her sleep, crying out loud.
That's awesome.
Just be quiet.
That's what toddlers should be like. So the fact that he had this selective mutism for 6 months leading up to the crime, to me, indicates that there was some sort of a trauma or some sort of a process going on either. So there was either an internal or an external trauma. An external trauma would be something like abuse of some sort, sexual abuse potentially. An internal trauma might be something like he was hearing voices. Some sort of a psychotic process happening.
That's scary, though.
It is scary, especially in somebody that young. It is incredibly rare to see someone that young with any sort of schizophrenic process. But when it happens, it tends to be quite severe.
Well, when does schizophrenia generally, if you are going to have it, inherit it, or develop it, when does it develop and when does it show? What age brackets?
It's very typical in the early 20s for men and in the mid to late 20s for women.
Wow, so they could be completely normal, generally speaking, and then just like a switch gets flipped, and next thing you know, they're running around talking to themselves? I mean, how does that really work? Or is it a gradual growing of the problem?
I can't, mention any names, but one of the most tragic, I felt, cases that I ever saw was while I was still in school. It was an undergraduate who came to the counseling center. And when you first see symptoms, it's actually called schizophreniform disorder because they don't meet criteria yet. So it was the first several months, and he was referred to the counseling center because he had left macaroni and cheese on the stove to the point where it started a fire in his apartment complex because he literally forgot about it. And campus security had found him on the campus burying dead birds.
Well, they are dead. I mean, he wants to do a proper burial.
Yeah, and he was kind of obsessed with, because there's a bunch of starlings that come into that area of the country at a certain time of year, and some of them pass away, and you see dead birds. It's not uncommon. But he was found in the middle of the night burying these dead birds. So
that is strange.
It was a very gradual process. Most of the time, he was pretty lucid. But in the times that he wasn't, his behavior was getting increasingly bizarre. And I felt really terrible because he wanted to continue with college, but it just became more and more evident that he wouldn't be able to.
Wow, that is truly a sad story. So in Michael Myers' case, what do you think caused his voluntary mutism?
I'm thinking that in his case, it was potentially some sort of abuse process that maybe pushed him over the edge because of the fact that he was so fixated on his family, and that, these pseudo-sexual situations kind of seemed to set him off as well. I'm wondering if there might, in my hypothesis, it would be that he was potentially sexually abused by either a family member or someone close to the family, and it kind of pushed him over an edge that he couldn't come back from.
Now, Michael is obviously the exception and not the rule, right? I mean, most people that are voluntary mutism, or isn't that the word that you use, voluntary mutism?
Selective mutism.
Selective mutism. They don't become psychopathic, serial killers that are after their own sisters.
Oh gosh, no. Most of them turn out just fine. It is definitely a really benign diagnosis, and when someone brings their child in with selective mutism, it's not an easy fix necessarily, but it's very early.
Okay,
so.
Well, that's good to know. If your kid wants to go silent for a little while, doesn't mean to be wielding a knife next week.
No, not at all. But it does mean that they should see somebody. I really want to point that out.
Yeah.
Really. If somebody has a child that is speaking like a toddler and is blah, blah, blah all the time, and then they just stop speaking, bring them in to see
that's
somebody.
a good point. Very, very good point. Okay, to wrap up Michael, what would the rest of your analysis be on him if he were a real serial killer out there actively? If you had to chase him down, I know you're not a profiler, so to speak, but you have done enough of that study. What would you tell people to look for?
He's definitely not going to stray far from his comfort zone. He doesn't know anything else. He was locked up at age 6. So my guess is that he's not going to be necessarily traveling the country. He shouldn't know how to drive a car. If he was a real, he shouldn't really know how to drive a car, at least not very well. He wouldn't have a lot of skills to take care of himself, i.e. killing a dog to eat it. He doesn't have any skills. He would stand out and he would go back to where he came from.
He's kind of like the horror movie equivalent of Rain Man.
Kinda, yeah. He was locked up at 6. He doesn't know how to do anything for himself.
Yeah, I'm a really good driver. I'm an excellent driver.
You remember, we actually watched, it just happened to be on Halloween, and we watched H2O, the 20th anniversary one.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which was not bad. It had actually quite a bit of star power, a lot of big names in it, and it was interesting enough. I had never seen that before. But at the very, very end, when she finally gets him, right? He is reaching out, and there's to him and or to her.
There's a moment of love.
Yes, there's a moment where they connect, and then, of course, she lops his head off.
Don't kill me, sissy. Don't kill me.
Which was probably wise on her part. I'm thinking 20 years of hiding and changing her name and having awful, terrible nightmares and taking antidepressants and what else was she taking? Percocet. And whatnot.
She was all over the board.
She had a lot of issues.
Well, before we go, though, what would be the treatment that you would give someone like that after they're apprehended?
Well, he'd need to be in a lockup facility, and my guess is that he would have schizoaffective disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and rule out childhood sexual abuse. So he would be put through the full gamut of state hospital treatment, which would be groups and individual sessions pretty much every day, all day.
Wow, would you want to be a group of Michael Myers doing group therapy?
I have been in groups with people like Michael Myers.
Take
that damn mask off.
Yeah. You're not William Shatner.
I have said weirder, so it's not. Yeah, I've had to stop people from playing ping pong with imaginary partners.
So there are people that do exist in the world, generally speaking, that can exhibit a Michael Myers type personality.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's why I so liked profiling him, because there were some pieces, at least that John Carpenter put in there, like the selective mutism. There were pieces that hinted at something a lot deeper. And the fact that he was so focused on his family, that is the type of patient that you see in like a state hospital system.
Wow, that's
Why
scary.
would he have wanted to wipe out his family? Because I know you made a big point of that in your article.
If he was abused by a member of his family, or they allowed him to be abused, or even if he delusionally thought he was abused, he might think, and especially if he really kind of detested himself on some level, he would think that the bloodline itself was tainted. Therefore, he has to wipe out everybody in that bloodline. It would be incredibly important for him to do that.
Wow, obsessive. He has to kill them. He has to kill them because he believes the bloodline is tainted. Wow.
That would be my guess. And I have seen people like that have tried to wipe out their entire family.
Jeez. Makes family reunions really hard. Or really easy.
They're all killers.
Yeah, really easy. Depends on your point of view. All right, there's a family reunion.
It's like a cage match.
Yeah. What are you doing this weekend? Well, there's a family reunion, and there's a few on the hit list I haven't got yet. So, I'll be busy. Don't worry. Don't worry. If you don't hear from me, I got caught. Well, we got to run a break, and when we come back, we're going to put the rest of the puzzle together, so to speak. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at Motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Anavar Media LCC is a dedicated team of professionals committed to helping business development scale and protect their websites, mobile applications, enterprise software solutions in the Northeast Ohio area. Locally owned since 2012, our client-centered values truly sets Anavar apart. Contact us today to learn how you can get 25% off your first project. Call them at 234-380-4852. Again, that's 234-380-4852. Or visit them at www.anavar.com. Again, that's www.anavar.com.
Hi, I'm Kip Parker.
And I'm Charlie Parker.
And we're the Parker Brothers. Hey, Charlie, what's missing from our game catalog?
I don't know, Kip, tell me.
Well, you can't talk to the dead.
You sure as hell can.
That's why we got this brand new game called Ouija.
Ouija? Well, break that down for me.
Well, it's Wii because you're having a great time, and G, it's because G, aren't you having a blast because you're having a good time with the Wii.
It looks like it smelled like a Chinaman got caught in there.
Don't question it.
Well, Ouija, Kip, tell me about it.
Well, inside the package comes a flat board with all the letters of the alphabet, numbers from 0 to 9, and a yes-no written out by itself.
Well, that sounds like a lot of stuff going on.
It's got a lot of stuff going on indeed, Charlie. It also comes with this planchette, which hovers over the letters the dead are trying to tell you.
Well, how does that work, Chip?
Well, you ask the question, and then the dead move your hands in the direction of the answers.
That sounds like a heck of a way to find Grandpa's slave money.
Turns out it was in the attic. But the questions don't have to be as serious as slavery. You can also find out if Sally's got a crush on you. The dead like to answer all sorts of trivial questions.
Feels like they'd have better things to do with their time, Kip.
No, lost souls are lost forever, and they're really glad to help.
Well, gee, Kip, can't you just get any sort of board with numbers and letters and talk to the dead?
The dead prefer quality like anybody else. Quality you can only find at Parker & Parker.
The Ouija board, brought to you by the Parker Brothers, available in both white and colored wallworks. Separate but equal savings.
You're listening to After Hours AM, the best in alternative talk radio. If you got a question for our guest tonight, email that to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Feeling social? Join the After Hours AM, America's Most Haunted group on Facebook. The coolest Facebook group anywhere.
We all gather round, pick a little song with a southern sound. Sure feels good this time of year. Take a little lift by the old okay.
And welcome back to After Hours AM. I'm your host, like always, Joel Sturgis, and right along with me,
Eric Olson.
And Eric, now Clarissa, she's going to put the picture together for us, totally, on the next one. Who was the next killer that you chose to profile from Hollywood?
This was a hard choice. There were definitely a lot of contenders, but the one that I felt would be the most interesting profile was actually John Jigsaw Kramer from Saw.
Really? Okay, yeah, he seems like a thinking man's mass murderer.
Yeah, that's what was so intriguing about him. And the part that's kind of difficult is that if you've only seen the first Saw movie, you might be a little bit lost because they really didn't do a lot of his backstory until the second movie.
No, they didn't do a whole lot of anything. He was the body laying there motionless for the whole duration of the movie.
But my God, was that good? Was it not? I'm sorry.
That was a good movie.
Well done.
That was a very good movie. The first one was really good. Second one was decent.
And it had philosophical, or moral depth to it. But pretty quickly, the series descended into torture porn. In fact, that's where the term was invented.
It did.
Torture porn.
Yeah, it kind of did become torture porn. You're right, and it became a joke. The Saw movies that were out like this time every year for a long time, and you're absolutely correct. And I think the first two of them were the best. After that, kind of went down to the torture porn kind of thing going on. If I want to see torture porn, I'll throw in the movie Hostel. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
Quentin Tarantino's, if that's really what I'm in the mood for, which I'm never in the mood for that. But thank God. Why don't you go ahead and give us the rundown? What was his young life like? John Kramer, rather. What was his young life like?
We don't, as far as I'm aware, we don't know a lot about his young life. So what I did was kind of assume that it was somewhat uneventful, somewhat normative. And it actually seems that way because he had a stable sort of early adulthood. He became a very successful civil engineer.
Yep.
And he got married to a woman named Jill Tuck, that he described as the love of his life, and they were happily married. There was, supposedly no, marital turmoil. He was happy in his marriage. And they were both employed outside the home. So he was a civil engineer working on, real estate, and she ran a recovery clinic for drug and alcohol addicts.
Really? So, they were normal people that had good jobs. You would think the normal American family, she worked in the medical field pretty much, and he was a civil engineer. What tripped his trigger?
Well, she, had this, the motto of her center was cherish your life as the philosophy. And, she seems like a very kind person. She eventually became pregnant with their child. But, she was working kind of a higher risk job. Working in a drug and alcohol center has risks that come with it. And during her pregnancy, there were some reckless actions of one of her patients, which caused her to miscarry that child, which meant everything to John.
So he decided to take it out on the world?
That's not at first. No, he didn't just go to that extreme at first. It caused discord in the marriage, and they did get divorced. And this is not necessarily uncommon after miscarriages, and certainly not after a child dies. So he lost that stability of having Jill in his life, and it spiraled out of control from there. He became more and more depressed, but he was trying to go on with his life. But then he goes to a routine medical appointment and gets a diagnosis of colon cancer with an inoperable brain tumor.
Oh, boy, he kind of got the double whammy right there.
Talk about pain, first of all. Colon cancer, extremely painful.
I've heard it's a pain in the butt.
Oh, God. Really? It's very bad, and a brain tumor not necessarily is painful, but it will kill you.
Yeah. Colon cancer is very, very deadly, and try not to make fun of it. I'm sorry about that. I do apologize. It is not a pain in the butt. It is a pain in the colon. And
yes, it's terrible, hard to treat, and definitely get checked. But this, he was already kind of depressed by the demise of the marriage and the miscarriage, right? So then he goes to the doctor trying to take care of himself, and he finds out, you don't have long to live. So this really, spiraled him out of control, and he attempted suicide. And I'm going to say this, guys, please don't get mad at me. In typical male fashion, he decided to go out in a blaze of glory. Women tend to
sexist.
I know, right? I'm a sexist pig. It's horrible.
Well, you know what? You may as well go all the bang rather than whimper. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly right. He drove his car over a cliff.
Yeah, come on. That's one of the biggest bangs.
It really, very well, and I shouldn't be sexist because Thelma and Louise kind of did the same thing. So anyway,
they really did, and they had a pact to do it too. They even held hands, so that's even worse.
It is worse, yeah. Well, he did not die after doing this.
Wow, he's a tough son of a gun, let me tell you.
No kidding. So he survived this attempt, and after and this is also not uncommon. Being a suicide risk expert, this is not uncommon when someone has an attempt that is very potentially lethal. They either come out of it and continue to be suicidal, or they come out of it with a kind of a totally different perspective. And that's what happened with John Kramer. He felt like he could sort of see more clearly that you need to cherish your life. Really, it's kind of the motto of the clinic.
Life is precious.
Don't waste it, the time you have.
Yeah.
but he kind of went in a more morbid direction with that.
Well, he kind of did. He started killing people. How precious could life be if he's devising mechanical things to kill people?
Well, okay, that is not fair now, Joel, because he was not killing people. The people just didn't have the ingenuity to escape.
Sorry, they weren't all masters in engineering to figure out. But,
I know, right?
So really, they were behind the 8 ball anyway. You walk into a place where you pull your hand out and it cuts your hand off. He played on the human. Really, what he did was he played on the human emotion and the human reaction to things, and he knew these reactions, and he made his gadgets, if you will, deadly enough to play on those reactions.
And he also tried to choose people in his mind that he felt like maybe didn't deserve to live because they had done something that he felt was unethical or immoral.
What makes him the godlike person to be able to do that?
Well, he's a psychopath, so most of them feel that way.
Is true. That is true. God complex.
Yeah, very narcissistic. But the thing that makes him so unique, not just the puzzles that he wanted people to try to escape from, but the fact that he was typically present in some form during all of these killing sessions, either physically like he was in the first Saw, or communicating through this Billy puppet, which is a surrogate. Yeah. So it leaves him a mystery and makes him even more creepy and mysterious. So if you do survive it.
Maybe you need that separation so he didn't feel so guilty.
I doubt it.
If he was not physically present there and someone's died, it wasn't like, he could be like, well, it wasn't my fault. There wasn't out. It was right there, and they just didn't take it, see?
Well, you might be onto something, though, Joel. I mean, the fact that he wasn't able to sort of look them in the face while this is happening, it does say something about him.
Yeah, he didn't have enough balls, so to speak, to confront these people. He would really rather just kill them and not discuss what they've done and maybe counsel people, which would be the better route to go, rather than making mechanical destruction devices.
Exactly. He's trying to use mortal terror as a motivator, and while that might work in the short term, it doesn't work in the long term.
No, gosh, no. I don't advocate anyone making any gadgets to kill each other, and quite honestly, it's the character now. Spoiler alert, but it's 10 years ago. Spoiler alert. He is dead. He did die in one of the Saws. He did succumb, I do believe, to his illness.
He did.
And so he is no longer with us. But my gosh, talk about just smart, being really smart. In fact, we're joking. Hannibal Lecter versus John Kramer. Who'd win? Pitting them both against each other. They're almost equal in intelligence.
They are some of the most intelligent, horror icons, iconic villains that I came across. And the thing that I found so fascinating researching this, and I'm really glad that, that you guys really asked me to look into this, because I wasn't necessarily going to do this. It's not what I do, is profile fictional characters. But what I found really ubiquitous across all the horror genres is that, like Eric, like you were saying, there's something relatable, right, about that villain. Even Hannibal Lecter, there's something relatable.
You got to have that because, deep down inside of us, each and every one of us, and our lower brain is a killer.
Well, and we also want revenge against those people that we feel have wronged us. And Jigsaw is one of those, he is seeking some sort of moral justice, even if it's skewed and weird.
Evidently, Jigsaw never got the memo that the best revenge is living well.
Yeah, good point. Well, he didn't have long to live,
That is true. Yeah, you're right, though. He was figuring, well, lights up for me anyway, so I might as well take as many of these morons as I can take with me.
Was there a specific incident that triggered him? Boy, that's the big term these days. My kids use it, ironically. I'm triggered. Oh, I'm triggered. Oh, I'm triggered.
Yeah, just trip my trigger.
You're triggering me. You are triggering me right now. I'm hearing this all the time. Anyway, was there something specific? Was this a gradual path from way back, or was he really okay as he appeared to be until something specific happened? Was the suicide attempt, or was it the divorce? Was there one thing, or was it a series of things? What are your thoughts on how he ended up being this person?
Well, I think that he was probably, I mean, this is going to sound bad, but I think he was probably sort of always this person. He had to have psychopathic tendencies to do what he did. So my guess is that, you know, he was kind of always this person underneath, but he found somebody that he could relate to in Jill, somebody that made him a better person. And he was looking forward to having a child with her, and when that got taken away from him, he felt very cheated. And so my guess is that that is what was the trigger, because I think that John Kramer himself would say it was the suicide attempt that was the trigger. Mm-hmm. But suicide, especially driving off of a cliff, is violence toward the self. He is already committing violence at that point.
Yeah.
So when you're already trying to off yourself, which is violent, what I consider violence toward the self, the trigger was before that. So I've had people say to me that they were violent because they attempted suicide and it didn't work. And I'm like, no, you were violent before that.
Well, yeah, generally they are. And it's mostly, have you noticed that there are not very many female serial killers in cinema?
There aren't, and it's well, okay, here's the hard part, I think, about women, is that women's victims tend to be children or weaker women.
That
Eileen
true.
Vernos is an exception to that. You know, as a true serial killer, Eileen Vernos is definitely the exception. There are many women serial killers out there. Many, many, many. Yeah. Most of their victims tend to be children.
Yeah. Well, they do. You're correct. Usually,
and I think it's too hard. It's too hard to fictionalize that and have the audience stomach it.
Well, you have to have some. Even Michael Myers, like we said, there is some compassion towards the character. You know, we all have had that moment where we'd be just so mad we could kill. You know, but of course we have our normal, rational brain kicks in, saying, well, you know, A, it's not worth the prison time, and B, you know, could you live with yourself afterwards?
Well, and there's the horror genre. Like I hate when people down the horror genre of films. You know, like they're stupid or they're bad entertainment or whatever, because they really are modern sort of parables about. They're morality tales. They're about ethics. They're about virtues, you know, because virgins, you know, are typically not necessarily a target. Well, people that are not virginal are. Yeah. It's a modern morality tale. They're more complex than people give them credit for.
Do you think that like a movie like a Friday the 13th, where it's just Jason Voorhees murdering people, do you think in some ways, somewhere in our brain, in our subconscious, we're vicariously living through that character?
Oh, yeah, we have to be. Humans are, that's the weird part about society now, people worrying about video games, worrying about, you know, like we were talking about The Walking Dead earlier, you know, worrying about that being on television. One of the reasons that I do not worry about that kind of thing is because as humans, we are violent. Yeah. We are an apex predator. And when you look at historical times, even going back to Victorian times, which was not that long ago, there was so much more blood and gore and violence on a daily basis their faces. So watching The Walking Dead, the only thing I'm concerned about is that now we're removed from it. That concerns me.
Yeah, we are away from, you know, that time in history where, you know, the guillotine was in vogue and things were just horrific. I was reading an article, someone had written, he was a psychologist saying, you know, at one point in in world history as humans, disembowelings were very common in the town square.
Yes, well, and mental institutions, if you could call them that, were more like dungeons with big picture windows where people could walk by and observe the person being either, you know, in restraints or in an isolation box. Sure. I mean, it was terribly brutal, but at the same time, you weren't removed from it by a computer screen or a television screen. It was right there in front of you. It was a neighbor, a friend, or somebody that someone knew. There was a humanity to it. That was different.
Do we as humans need that, though? Do we need the horror genre? Because there is this inherited lust for blood to some extent?
Well, we don't do anything violent anymore. We're not allowed to. Like, kids aren't allowed to. Well, no, kids aren't allowed to push each other down on the playground anymore.
That is true. There is no more backyard fights. There is no after-school fights. No,
I mean, come on. Like a kid can't play tag and accidentally push another kid down anymore because their parents will get charged with assault.
Well, this is the age of everybody gets a trophy for participating, that everyone's equal, and that there should be no pecking order. And I remember being a young guy in the 1990s when I was in high school. It was fairly common to see an after-school brawl between two guys duking it out.
And the other thing that people are missing, and that I don't like other mental health professionals talking about, the participation is important. Okay, I think that's I don't like that because of the fact that the reason that people learn where they're supposed to be in life, what they're supposed to do, the whole reason that I'm a geek is because I sucked at sports and everybody told me so. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hear you. I totally get it. I was told I could never shut up. That's why I went on the radio.
But it's instructive. It's instructive. It helps you figure out where you should be in life. And if somebody had told me you get a trophy for participation in softball, God knows.
Clarissa, believe it or not, you might find this shocking. I was the class clown.
No.
Yes, me. I was him. That was me. I was the class clown. I know Eric probably was too.
Yes, I was too.
Yeah, we both were. Look at us now. But moving along with this character,
I was the subversive class clown. It was never the obvious stuff. It's the under the breath, behind the scenes. Don't get caught.
Gotcha. You're the cautious clown.
I'm the let other people get blamed for it.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
You're the guy that snuck up to the pencil sharpener and just made faces, and everybody else got in trouble for laughing.
Not me. I would say loud and proud, that was me. I'm the one that did it, and I will take my punishment because the chicks dig it.
You're right about that.
They like the bad boy. But moving on.
But not too bad.
Well, not too bad, but there are limits to being how bad you can be. I mean, But we're talking John Kramer here. Did he ever have any accomplices in his sprees, or was he a solo guy?
Well, that's where Saw got really confusing for me. That was upsetting to me, Joel, when I was trying to do this hypothetical sort of profile, because somebody like John Kramer isn't the type that I would consider to have an accomplice or sort of a protege. It doesn't really fit with a true psychological profile, but as Saw went on, he did.
Yeah, well, that's his God complex. He wanted his work to continue.
Yeah, I can see that, but somebody that was so exacting like he was would be so narcissistic that I would think everyone would fail him.
No, well, you would think so. You would think so. I mean, that threw me for a loop as well, because I thought for sure, Saw 2 came along, and then they started putting accomplices. I thought, wow, this guy that is supposed to be uber smart, outsmarting Danny Glover of all people. Poor Danny Glover. Outsmarting the police, taunting the police to some extent, where they're finding these bodies, finding them in warehouses, whatnot. But yet he's going to be brave enough and maybe open himself up to having an accomplice that could blow up in a space. You would have thought that he would have been way more cautious than that.
I agree. The only thing that fits with the profile for me with that is because he was terminally ill, he might be willing to open himself up to more risk, because he's going to die anyway, so he has nothing to lose in that way. So that could kind of fit, but I still think it's a stretch.
Could you imagine what kind of celebrity he'd be once he hit prison with other killers? They'd be like, yes, you're like my God, man.
Well, speaking of that, I want to get back to the people that have all these morbid Jigsaw tattoos.
Yes, you were saying that.
Google it on the internet, or don't, because it's creepy. But there are all these. When I was doing my research to do these profiles, I was looking at all the pictures and different things. There are all these people that have the jigsaw piece of flesh.
Oh my Lord, they do.
They do. That was taken out of the skin in the movie, and I was actually kind of shocked by that.
Wow. Yeah, I'm Googling it right now, and people have really gotten creative with it.
Yeah.
Wow, that is really kind of scary.
So why would they do that? Please explain that to me. I've never gotten that. I don't worship at the feet of killers and evil.
Do you have a tattoo at least?
I have no tattoo.
I have tattoos. Okay.
I do too, but not that would glorify a killer. And The only thing that I can think is, you know what? Okay, so have you guys seen the Boondock Saints?
I have. Norman Reedus is in it.
Yes.
Yes, he is. And I've seen multiple tattoos with that, the Equitas Veritas, truth and justice. I've seen multiple tattoos. And technically, they are serial killers. That they are. I mean, Boondock Saints. So I think it is the idea that Jigsaw represents a sort of a truth and a justice. That's all I can think.
Yeah, I see you. I'm following you down this path, but my gosh, talk about going about the wrong way.
Yeah, I know, especially the more gruesome ones where it really looks like a piece of their flesh was taken out. I mean, to me, I see what they're trying to represent, but doesn't that represent the fact that you didn't survive one of his puzzles and now you're dead and he took a piece?
True. Now, in the movies, they never show a profiler after him.
No.
You know, it's not like there is a yin to the yang. There is no Starling after him. There is no good guy, so to speak, in any of this. It's not like, you know, other than the police, of course, which is showing he dispatches them. But there's none of these, you know, like, yes, this is the Jigsaw killer again. You know what I mean? There's no hero to bond to.
Well, but that's the thing that made it so interesting with Jigsaw is that they're trying to make him both. He's also the hero. He's the villain and the hero of his own story because he only goes after, he's the only person that, he picks people that he feels don't deserve to live.
Yeah, he's the tortured hero is what he is. Which is...
Does this mean that under the surface, a high percentage of us really wish that we were vigilantes or that there was a more common more common instances of vigilante justice? I mean, do people not remember lynching? That's not even 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, but I also know from being on the inside of it how the system works, how slowly it works.
Oh, God,
and how justice is often not meted out. I cannot tell you how many times I've read, I mean, this is literally every day of my working life, that I am reading reports about gentlemen who have had charges dismissed completely, quote, in the interest of justice. So just to get them convicted of a different crime, they have that piece dropped. And if you are the father of, it's typically a sexual crime.
Yeah.
So if you're the father of one of these women who have been raped, dropping that charge in the interest of justice, it makes me mad too.
Well, you know, the thing of it is vigilante justice is instant. You know, it would be a much more polite environment in America or anywhere really where if you could be held responsible almost instantly for your crime.
Justice should be swift, and that's what people don't understand. I'm not talking like ignoring due process. That's wrong. And vigilante justice, although really satisfying, is also wrong.
It is wrong. Absolutely it is.
It's wrong, but I think that the system needs to become a lot faster than it is because justice, when it's meted out many, many years later, it's not effective.
You know, when I was going to college, I took some history courses, Old West history courses.
Oh.
And I was really interested because my family came from Sturgis, South Dakota, which is right in the heart of the Old West. And it was interesting to read about how they treated people. But back in those days, if you were convicted of, let's just say, murder, they would grab you and take you to the gallows. You know, they were not interested in a lot of my, you know, what I read, were not interested in doing appeals and this and that. When the judge's gavel fell, that was it. You were done.
Right, and even up until, even in quote-unquote civilized times after the Old West, it was usually only a matter of weeks or months before somebody was put to death.
Now they're 20 years, 25 years.
People die of old age, especially in California. Almost all of the guys on death row die of old age.
That's maddening for most of us looking in, especially the victims and their families. Here they are, you know.
What I've seen more than once, and this almost makes me cry to think about, is people that have put videos in their wills because they know that the killer will outlive them. So every time there's a parole hearing, it gets played at the parole hearing because they know that the killer will live longer.
That's horrible. Okay, we only have about a minute left, and Jigsaw, basically, he dies, of course, in the movie series, but the moral of the story is life is precious. That's supposed to be the moral of the story, but really what it became is revenge is also served up really sweet when it's cold. is one of the morals of that story, too. You know, that you should be living better. Otherwise, he will take revenge for your misdeeds.
Yes.
You know. So anyhow, Clarissa, we've got about a minute left. How can people read both articles? Where can they go?
They can read them by going to www.thecriminalcode.com. Both profiles are up right now.
Cool. I'm going to be reading those again on the website. I enjoyed reading them. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for doing so much work. You went above and beyond profiling these folks.
Thank you. Very fun.
Oh, it was. On behalf of myself, buddy, I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olson. Oh, that's me.
Yeah, that is you. That is you, Eric Olson. We are here, and this story, I'm going to let you do the introductions. Normally do a snippet. I can't even do that. This story is one of those where the introduction really has to paint the picture first.
As we were saying, the iconic image of this poor woman 7 years into her corpsehood is all over the internet, but the story behind it is many, many layered, and we're going to find out about all those layers. No Place for the Living will chronicle the true account of the life and strange obsessions of Count Carl von Cosel. I believe it's Cosel.
It's Cosel.
Cosel. All right. I'm stupid. Thank you, Ronnie.
Sure.
All right.
You'll get over it.
Be quiet again now. Who authorities discovered had lived with the corpse of Elena Hoyos for 7 years. He claimed to be in communication with her spirit, and like a latter-day Dr. Frankenstein, was convinced he could use groundbreaking scientific methods to bring her back to life. When the world learned the truth, their macabre relationship became a media sensation, now mostly forgotten. Ronnie Thomas seeks to tell the tale. Welcome to the show, Ronnie.
Wow.
Thank you guys so much.
Okay, Roddy, I've watched your work before, and you're a very, very talented filmmaker, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Why would you want to tackle this particular subject?
Why? Why would anyone want to do this? I suppose I have kind of a guilty pleasure, I suppose. I'm fascinated with the human mind, and I think this story is wildly about the human mind and delusions in particular. You know, the way that the human mind kind of constructs the world around us without our control. And I think his story has a lot of twists and turns that aren't so evident on the internet or the short snippets that you get, you know?
Yeah, you see a small documentary, like a snippet off the Travel Channel about Key West, and they talk a little bit about it only in very, very macabre terms, but they don't really dive into the characters involved. Now, who exactly was Carl Tanzler, or A.K.A. Carl von Cosel? Sorry, I won't.
Well,
there we go.
I only correct you because the people of Key West have given me so much grief from calling him Cosel, because it's not Howard Cosell.
Yeah,
they're so
Howard Cosell, come over here, my corpse. Right.
Yeah. That'd be even a better film, probably. But here's a guy who was in between the wars in Germany, and that's where his story begins, right? And that's a complicated time to begin with. He's in the Weimar era of Germany, and he's married. He has 2 children. He's got I don't think you could have had a normal life between the wars in Germany. So there had to be something there. He'd been in internment camps in Australia, or so he claims. Who knows? He claims so much, and God knows what's true and what's not. But I see him as this kind of wayward soul who just wanted to break out of where he was, almost like a punk rocker.
Yeah.
He just wanted to be something different, and took this wild leap to the States, and landed in Cuba at first, saw the color and the wonder of that, and then landed in Zephyr Hills, Florida, which I don't know if you've ever been there. I haven't, but apparently it's just a miserable place. So where are you going to go? You're going to go to Key West.
He never visited Minnesota then. During winter. Okay, let's hold judgment on misery until. No, I'm kidding, of course. But that being said, how? Okay, now he was a radiologist technician, but he told the people he had, 9 other degrees?
Yeah, well, who knows if he was actually a radiologist or kind of weird polymath, just some guy who knew, or, just kind of a jack of all trades, a guy who knew a little bit about everything. And in his journal, which is what the film is kind of basing itself on, I want to go off his own words, as deluded and as strange as they may be, it's still from the horse's mouth. So I want to base the film on his own accounts. So by his own accounts, he was this kind of polymath, this guy who knew everything. He had, I think it was 9 languages, 5 college degrees in physics and science and all these things. But he was also deeply spiritual. And those two never seem to work together, right? Spiritual and science.
Generally not. Generally they kind of...
I think we're getting closer to that nexus, but and God willing we are. But certainly, I think he was influenced by theosophy, if you know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people,
Madame Blavatsky.
Yeah, but in his journal there are little clues that indicate that he was kind of a theosophist, because he's mixing all these things around, and he talks about Brahmin wisdom, and so he's just this wayward traveler looking for a new life.
Well, he found one.
In so many more ways than one, right?
Looking at the guy, I mean, just photos of him from, period photos, of course, he looks just like an unassuming, small, almost country-looking doctor in a lot of ways. You'd never suspect him to fall in love with a dead girl, or he was already in love with her, but then, of course, we'll get into that. But he just doesn't give this psychopath or crazy aura about him. I mean, of course, like you said, he lived in a very, very hard time in Germany, and if you didn't, have some type of mental issues after living through that, you'd not be a human,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, but also I think that he was looking for something else. He was dealing with the frustrations that we deal with every day in modern times. He was, I really see him, and this might be going way too out there, but as what you'd call an art brute or an outsider artist, just this restless soul. So, and I think where we're going is he's going to create this life for himself of his own design, this surrealistic life.
Sure. No, it's a story, all right. And I was watching your video course over at Kickstarter, very well put together, by the way. And I recommend everybody go over there to check it out. If you're on America's Most Haunted page, there is a link directly to the Kickstarter. Go check it out, because you're going to be making this fascinating film, but you're not going to be using flat-out actors. You're going to take that leap and do a puppetry, which I think is really, really kind of a really cool concept, because you don't see that a lot anymore.
No, that was really, it was like, there's a couple reasons for that. And the overt one is it's cooler and more interesting than cheesy actors, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And you see it so often, and especially with his case, you see these really corny reenactments. And I don't think actors, at least in the budget, let's be honest, that I can afford as kind of a no-name director, I'm not going to be able to afford top-name celebrities who can really bring his character to life. Puppetry can kind of, artistically facilitate that design. But also, it's what the story, as we'll start divulging, is about. He was trying to reanimate this corpse. He wasn't interested in her as a dead body. He wasn't attracted to her as a dead body. He was attracted to her as a living being. And so his obsession with her was her beauty, and his ambitions were to reanimate her corpse. And so that's puppetry to me. He's playing puppet master.
Sure. Okay. I get that. Now that really makes sense. Now you're using the puppetry as kind of a statement as well, if that's what he ultimately wanted to do with her.
Well, also there's another layer to that where he kind of manipulated, not just her family, because he got kind of custody of her afterlife in a sense from them by manipulating them, but also the town. And as we go through the story, you'll see the town really were big fans of his, and they still are. I mean, I got an email today suggesting that I'm trivializing his story by making it a Tim Burton type puppet movie and not something like Russell Crowe's A Beautiful Mind. And I love that. Like they still really honor and revere this guy, but he kind of really manipulated everybody and played puppet master to so many things, including his own life. And
would he fall kind of into that pathological liar kind of area with his being able to manipulate and tell tales and be able to bend people to his will?
I think it all goes back to the old George Costanza. It's not a lie if you believe it.
Oh, touche, my friend, touche.
And I think he truly believed it. There's no evidence in my mind that could suggest he did not believe that he had indeed resurrected her corpse. And who knows? Like, I'm a 40 and a Charles Fort guy. Who knows? Who's to say? Maybe he did.
Yeah.
I would love to hear the actual story of their relationship. What is the backstory? How did they meet? What was the relationship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
And again, we're dealing with the kind of falsities of history and the falling through of the cracks, So he definitely had a relationship with Elena. And he describes it in his journal. His biographers describe it, and the court cases describe it in very different ways. She was amiable to him. She'd been married before meeting him, but she'd miscarried a child, and the husband couldn't deal with it, so he took off.
Mm-hmm. Wow!
Because all Spanish men, Spanish men at the time were total tough guys until you miscarry a baby, and then they're
and that's it. You're out of my life. That's a deal breaker.
Lucy, you got some spanning to do.
Why did you miscarry my baby?
Yeah, how dare you?
So he took off, and so in this guy's mind, he was heartbroken when he realized she was married, but then relieved when he was like, oh, but he's gone, and so she kind of is up for grab. Now, keep in mind, for listeners who don't know the story, he's about 30 years older than her. Or more than 30 years older than her. So he's an old man in the 1930 standard.
Sure.
But he fashions himself and plays himself off as this count, this aristocrat.
Yeah.
And so the family at first are not only taken with him because he's this wealthy aristocrat, but he's also a doctor, and their daughter's dying of tuberculosis. So they naturally kind of think, well, here's this guy who is willing to save our daughter's life, our sister's life. And the antagonist in the story is Elena's sister. She's the only one who really sees him for what he is.
Sure.
And it's constantly like, in Ed Wood, when she kind of has that moment,
that
you're
epiphany.
all insane.
Yeah, you're all crazy.
You're all crazy. She's the only one, and she's eventually the one to undo the whole thing. But it took her very long. But, everyone kind of goes along with it. And he's doing all these. He was a mad scientist. I mean, if there ever was a true-to-life mad scientist, he's it. And he's shoving tubes down her throat that are trying to. It's all radiation. Maybe. He's got some obsession with radiation, but he's trying to kind of irradiate tuberculosis, which would just give her cancer.
Yeah. Well, just give her debilitating cancer. That's all. It's curing one affliction to give you another. All right, good times.
But there's.
It was the 30s.
Well, it was. Yeah. It was the 30s. All was up for grabs.
We all did crazy things in our 30s.
We sure did.
Or the 30s. So. But there's no evidence to suggest that she wasn't amiable to him. And probably, as we look at history, and I talk to historians, probably flirty and, not to stereotype, but probably just, like what you would expect a young girl who has everything to gain from an aristocratic.
Well, sure. She probably grew up poor.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, completely. They were cigar rollers.
Yeah, I mean, so she grew up poor, and here's this aristocrat coming in, offering these grandiose things. I mean, come on, it's power and wealth are often very, very attractive things.
Oh, sure. And even if they're, unfounded. I mean, because he was not the count he claimed to be. There's nothing that says
he's about as much a count as the count in Sesame Street. 1, 2. Yeah.
But he does put on a good display. But the family really go back and forth, and they think he's a bit abusive to them. He's never abusive to her. Mm-hmm. He is doting beyond all control to Elena, and but the family are they're just getting sick of him because he's really cruel to them, and treats them like spoiled children.
Sure.
So when she finally does die, he pretty much, and it's in his journal, in his own words, he pretty much blames them for not listening to him and his wisdom, and he's a bit of a megalomaniac in that way. And you can see how insanity is kind of growing in this whole scenario.
Well, the whole scenario is insanity. I mean,
oh yeah, totally.
It's lunacy.
Sure.
But now, was there ever any evidence that he had any physical contact with her while she was alive? Did she ever, was she ever intimate with him?
No, and he in his journal, there's nothing to suggest. And now any self-respecting male who would write in that, journal, hey, and there was this one time when we made out.
Yeah, one time we made whoopee.
Yeah, exactly.
It was Key West, and I got to second base.
Yeah, swinging for the fences.
But he doesn't allude to that. But he's also a very devout Catholic, and I was raised Catholic as well, and I know how that's, a barrier between so many things.
Well, but this is true.
Yeah. So again, there's all this conflict there. But after she dies, he is given kind of, I guess, financially, as it's financially favorable to the family, he kind of takes the burden on to bury her and to take care of the funeral and all this stuff. So he kind of inserts himself. That's when they really join hands, basically, because he couldn't have her in life, but in death, because he's got some kind of small living wage from the hospital, and there's money coming from Germany that is kind of, nobody really knows what it was.
Yeah.
He's able to afford the funeral and to pay for everything. So
yeah,
the family just kind of go along with it.
Meanwhile, he puts 2 jugs of formaldehyde in that coffin to keep her fresh.
Yeah.
I'll ziplock her for later.
Yeah, right. Let's just keep it right. Well, no, but that became the issue. So now he goes and rents her bedroom from her parents, and again, it's this poverty, wealth dynamic. So it's they don't want to do it, and the sister, the Nana, is like, you're fucking. I'm sorry, can I say that?
No, sorry, no.
Beep it out. So you're insane. Like, don't do this. This guy it's out of his mind.
Sure.
But they're like, but we need the money. So what are we going to do?
All right, Ronnie. Okay, here's the deal. You're the sympathetic ear in this whole thing. Okay, me, yeah. I think that guy is bat spit crazy. Okay, this guy is crazier than crazy. He's crazier than my grandpa used to call crazier than a pet coon. Okay, I don't know what that ever meant, but there it is. If he wanted to rent her room, at that point, wouldn't the family be going, what the hell are you doing over there? I mean, you're a little obsessive. Can't you move on like the rest of us are? I mean,
I'm an independent filmmaker, so I'm frequently broke. And, I know what desperation feels like. And also I think the challenge of depression and the challenge of loss. But to your point, he'd been really cruel to them and yelled at them and blamed them for the daughter's death. So it's kind of absurd on so many levels that they'd say, go ahead, rent our dead daughter's room who you were obsessed with.
Yeah, go ahead. We don't mind. And we kept a few of her articles up there, if you know what I'm saying there, big boy.
Well, so But while he's up there, as he's kind of going through her loss, he does begin to, hear voices as will happen if you're insane.
Well, yeah, that happens to be a side effect, I guess, of insanity. Is the frequent voices.
Or if you're a mad scientist.
Well, that is true too.
Well, sure, and who knows what's going on? But she had originally been buried in the ground, and so
many are.
Well, that's where they usually put them. But this is Key West, so it's below sea level.
Yeah, and they tried burying him on a beach once. That didn't work out at all for them.
No, they just wash up.
Yeah, they do. It's funny how that works. I guess no one ever thought about that.
So it's during in his journal a night of a heavy storm that he realizes, oh, well, this is bad because the rain is just going to seep in and it's going to corrupt the body of this woman that I love. So it just almost in like a cinematic fury, he wakes up and he goes to the funeral parlor and the cemetery and says, dig her up. I need this body to come out of the ground because I'm sure it's going to be damaged by the low level and by the heavy rains. And they were like, well, and as you might imagine, they were like, yeah, okay.
Sure, whatever.
Yeah, why not? Whatever floats your boat there, man.
Anything else? Can we do anything else for you?
Anyway, right. Is there a dog you want to dig up? Or...
I wonder if they ever heard this coming from his room when he was thinking about her.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Sorry, I couldn't help the Frankenstein reference.
But not only do they acquiesce to his demand to dig her up, but they put him, this radiologist, in charge of her reinterment. And he's now the doctor or the mortician who's in charge of taking her body out, readjusting it. And at the same time, he's building this crypt for her on a plot of land in the cemetery that he's bought. So madness is just abound.
Yeah. I mean, madness has run amok at this point, and her poor family is probably counting the money. Yeah, look at that. He's giving us some mad money here just to be able to hang out with our daughter. I'm not going to spoil the goods for her, but tell him she's dead. All right?
Totally. It's craziness. So now they have funeral number 2, where now she's okay. Now she's out of the ground, but he describes it in the journal of, if they'd only done what he asked. He wanted them to embalm the coffin. Now, that doesn't mean anything to any mortician that I've talked to embalm. The coffin.
That would make no sense.
Well, I guess to keep the bugs out or whatever. But he's talking about like the damage to her body, and it's not her fault, and it's certainly not his fault. It's everyone else's fault, and there's no reason she should be in this state.
Well, thank God her family didn't offer cremation. I mean, he really would have been screwed.
Well, now they have funeral number 2. They put her in this really thoroughly locked up crypt that's above sea level now because it's above ground. And I think you've seen the pictures, certainly, of her mausoleum. And it's like a house, like almost like a postmodern house, which he visits nightly, and daily. And God knows, I always kind of question, is he getting any work done at this point?
Well, I'd start to, I imagine the people that are viewing him coming and going must have thought, wow, that guy has really flipped his cookies.
Yeah, he was, the children would harass him. And he writes about that in his journal that, because it's always children who see more than adults.
Oh,
do.
Sure.
Wow, this guy's nuts.
Yeah, he's a little on the deep end.
I may be a kid, but he's crazy.
Right, they're throwing rocks at him, and he's like, if they only knew.
The love that we have for each other.
Get off my lawn, you kids.
Get off my cemetery. Get off my tombstone.
You damn little whippersnappers.
But so here's where it gets really sadistic.
Oh, boy, we haven't gotten to that part yet.
We've not got to sadism yet.
We will get there. We'll save that for after the break, if that's cool.
So far.
Exactly.
Really, it's a love story. It's a modern love story at this point.
I think we're laughing a lot and we're having a big joke, but I do think stripping away the layers, it is. I do in my heart, and I want to believe that it is. As a lot of people, I think, at the time did. But he does begin to communicate telepathically with this body. He's been kind of talking, and there's suggestion that he puts a telephone.
We're going to take a break here quick before we take that wonderful, wonderful story. No, I'm just kidding. It's almost about icky, corpsey stuff. But I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me.
Eric Necrophilia.
Oh, I know. That's exactly what it is. And we are talking to Ronnie Thomas today, and he is going to be making a film all about, well, basically Carl Tanzler, or A.K.A. Count Carl von Cosel, right? Cosel, or is it Castle?
Castle.
Okay. Don't get the key right.
Okay,
before we return to this riveting, and boy, oh boy, it is riveting.
Well, we have a caller. We have a caller on the horn. Hello, caller.
Hi.
How are you?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Is this Elena?
I am. No, it's a person, and I'm disguising my voice.
Oh, I couldn't tell.
We couldn't tell that.
Yes, I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. Very interested in
You sound like Rocky the Squirrel.
Come on now, be nice to our caller.
Well, I could deepen it a little bit, but I just don't want anybody to know I want people to know my story, but not know who I am.
Oh, sure, sure.
But honest.
I am. Yes, I've been a fan of this Cosell story for quite some time, and as a young boy, I actually fell in love with a corpse myself.
I hear she gets around.
Yes. No,
my father.
Yes, my father worked in a funeral home, and late one night I didn't.
That's how it starts.
Yes. There was a woman there, and I was a young boy.
Okay, keep it PG. Keep it PG. We know that you got fire going on in the pants.
No, we didn't go all the way.
Well, that's good to know. You respected her enough.
I did respect her. So I just wanted to say I'm a big fan. I really I would have loved to see this film get made, because I do think that there can be love between the living and the dead.
Cross that veil.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, termites,
love never dies. And,
no.
God.
Love is never having to say you're a corpse.
Yes, so it is quite funny. Yes. You think I'm kidding around, but I am not.
No.
Don't kill me.
Yes. Yes, I'm a big fan, and I'm very impressed that this film is finally being made. The story is being told.
Sure.
Now, I had a question for Ronnie Thomas.
God, kill me.
Oh, let her rip, caller. Let her rip.
Now, there are rumors that Cosell put a tube inside of
this again.
This woman. And do you know if that's true? Can you do that?
Can you do that?
I personally can't. No.
Well, caller, thank you for calling in.
Collective you.
And then we're gonna let you go.
Very excited. You keep doing this. Please kickstart this project.
Absolutely.
I'm 100% behind it. And
Thank you.
I want to be 100% behind a corpse right now.
All right. Well, that being said, thank you for calling. And
what a great segue. Let's remind everyone about that Kickstarter campaign. And you simply go to Kickstarter, and then the name of the film is No Place for the Living, the mad story of Carl von Cosel. And everyone wants to say Cosell, but has nothing to do with Howard. And it's an amazing thing. All right, back to you, Ronnie. That was an amusing, if insane interlude, but it's utterly appropriate.
Is that the typical call you guys get on
not typically. I mean, this individual sound a lot like Grover from Sesame Street.
Rocky the Squirrel necrophiliac call in, sure.
Not every day.
I want the support of Grover. It's a puppet movie. So anyway.
Elmo's going to call in next saying, I want to play the part of Carl. I haven't had any kind of fun in acting in a very long time.
Oh, God.
Okay, let's get to the serious matter of sadism.
So we left off, I think, where, they've decided to, oh God, the Cuban people are going to kill me. Castle, not Cosa. Castle.
No, Castle.
And it's mainly in his mind, Elena, who needs to leave the cemetery. She's made friends with her neighbors, and this is all in his journal.
And he's not going to put up with that, gosh darn it. He's sick of that. They just keep crashing the party.
Yeah, they're wayward spirits, So she's made friends with all the people in the cemetery, so he's naturally against this idea, which indicates that he isn't insane. So, and he's saying, like, no, we can't do this. I'll be caught. They'll never understand. They don't get it. And they, referring to normal human beings.
The world
around us. And he's oddly, ironically wrong, but when he kind of says that, but we'll get to that later.
Sure.
But so she's like, no, don't worry about it. My neighbors have kind of offered to help. The woman next to me.
The dead neighbors.
The dead neighbors, the people in the cemetery.
Okay, just making sure. What a lively group there for a cemetery.
I suppose it's worth clarifying. The dead neighbors. They've all decided, okay, let's help Elena out. She wants out. I get it. She wants to be back with Carl.
The Count.
The Count. Who wouldn't want to be? So so he's still living in her bedroom, but I guess it's kind of coming to a point where he realizes the two of them should make this legit. So she apparently tells him about a house near the cemetery that is abandoned, up for rent.
So, okay, make this legit, like as in make an honest woman out of this corpse?
Make an honest corpse out of this woman. Or whatever, yeah.
Sure, okay, I get you now. Like as in wedding bells.
Well, absolutely. So when he goes about doing this, he describes this Red Ryder wagon that he buys to support the corpse. Now, it gets really wacky here because I don't actually know how this could have happened, because this indicates something supernatural. She's in this crypt. It's not exactly an easy thing to pull off. To go to a cemetery, even in 1930s, when there is no street lamps, really, powerful lighting.
Sure.
How this is accomplished, if it indeed is even accomplished, there's evidence to maybe suggest that when he had dug her up in the first place, she never made it into the crypt.
Okay. Yeah. So he gets her out of the cemetery, going, "You're too good for this." And the neighbors help her out to get out of the cemetery, oddly enough.
Right. Well, it's what he describes as this kind of, it's where the title "No Place for the Living" comes from.
Okay.
And he, in the journal, he says this was indeed no place for the living on this darkest of nights, and he describes it as this not funeral procession, this marriage ceremony, and the spirits of the cemetery had come to life, and they never experienced such a joyous occasion, this reunion of these two people. So, but he's in reality wheeling her on this children's Red Ryder wagon with their kind of decomposing corpse.
You didn't spring
kind of hanging over it, I would think.
No,
she's bouncing off the sidewalk.
My gosh!
Thump, 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 thump.
But it's not even the sidewalk. It's the dirt of the cemetery. So she's just kind of like
dragging along.
Yeah.
Unless he folded her up or something.
Oh my gosh, Eric.
I'm trying to put myself there.
Well, I think it's important to or at least add that he did have a death mask made of her, but that'll come in later, I'm sure, into the story. Okay, so
that's the very end, yeah, sure. But
yeah, he gets her home. They have the wedding. Everyone's all happy. He brings her home, the Red Ryder wagon. Hey, look, we're home, honey. And he carries her over the threshold. Everyone's happy. Okay,
and that's actually how he describes it. Is carrying her over the threshold into this temporary living space in this abandoned house near the cemetery. And who does he enlist to help him move the body into this house that he finds on the beach?
The dead people.
Not even worse, even more sadistic.
Her family.
Oh my Lord! He gets the family to help her move. So
her family, and he says it in the journal. Would they know that their beloved daughter is in the back of this makeshift airplane that he's trying to build to fly to the seven seas with her?
You got to be kidding me! They didn't know. I mean, they hadn't known.
No.
They didn't know they're moving their own daughter.
The brother-in-law showed up and is asked to move this coffin. And he's like, well, why a coffin? He's like, oh, I just use it for spare
parts.
I keep my tools in it.
Yeah. Well, that is exactly what he said. It's a tool. It's just a convenient.
No
tool
pun intended.
I keep my spare parts in there. You just never know you're going to lose a tube.
I keep my tool in there.
So he first has them move her into this crazy steampunk George Millet looking airplane that he's building, and uses this as some makeshift mad scientist lab. You know, it's all equipped in his mind to kind of start the resurrection process. And he puts her in the cabin of this thing, and that's where she kind of lives in the hospital where he's working. And he describes in the journal having to kind of douse himself constantly because he stinks, because it's disgusting.
Yeah, he used lots of perfume to cover up the stench of decomposition.
I got one thing to say.
Yes.
It's a good thing he lived in Key West, because any other community would not have put up with that nonsense.
No, he would have been gone. It would have been so gone. Again, for anyone that's just tuning into this craziness, we are talking again with Ronnie Thomas, and he is a filmmaker, and he is making a film, of course, about the tale of, Carl Tanzler is what I like to call him, because that was his given name, but Count Carl von Kassel. And that is the tale of where a man lived with a corpse for 7 years, and we are covering that right now. And taking that hard left turn into Albuquerque, the caller mentioned a certain tube. Is that true, or is that false?
We're jumping ahead a bunch, but yeah.
Okay. Let's not.
Okay, let's not jump ahead. Okay, let's keep on the circus.
Let's keep it in an orderly progression.
Yeah. We're not too far from the tube, and I'm sure that the tube has come up. You know, it has been.
We're
used
not far
many,
from the tube.
many
I can
times.
smell it.
Oh God!
All right,
So,
go ahead. Sorry.
In his as the body kind of becomes his possession, he isn't exactly just trying to use her as this sex doll, you know, this kind of toy to be used. And at least in his journal, which I kind of in a, Fordian way, just accept, okay, he was trying to use what he considered advancements in science matched with mysticism to try and reanimate this corpse. He had this notion that he calls Brahmin wisdom, which again, I think links back to theosophy, where he says the cure for any disease, any terminal disease, is to die for 1 year, be buried, and then be dug up and come back to life. You know, that's the cure.
Oh, wow.
It makes absolutely no sense in our materialist world, right? But he claims to have seen this while traveling in India. He'd been, traveling, and he'd been in the bushes, and he kind of witnessed this actually happening. This man had died for a year. They buried him in the ground. They dug him up, and he was like, oh, man, that was great. Cancer's gone.
Is it possible the man had a twin? Playing a joke.
Or actually, he was like, why did you bury me for a year?
Yeah, what the hell?
Man, that was hard breathing, and I lost a lot of weight.
Yes,
so
yes.
He's not only convinced with that, but he's also convinced that he has the medical knowledge and the technical knowledge to reanimate her corpse. Some of it is by playing music to her. He travels the world with this pipe organ. Now it's not a lute. It's a pipe organ.
Not everybody has a
It's
pipe.
not a lute.
Not everybody has a pipe organ in their back
It's
pocket.
not a harmonica he can put in his pocket.
He travels the world with a pipe organ.
Well, that's pretty normal. Yeah, okay.
Dr. Fibes.
That he claims to have built from spare scrap metal on an Australian beach in an internment camp. So it's, again, this crazy delusion but he claims he plays for her nightly, not just, I forget exactly how he put it, and I should probably know it, but like not just for the fancy of it, but because it stimulates cell growth, It stimulates her rejuvenation process, and claims that he, over the course of 7 years, made very good progress, and that occasionally she'd spit up blood and her veins would start pulsing and she'd sit up in bed. And it's actually very terrifying when you...
God, yes.
Well, I mean, really put yourself in that mind space. And if you're a sane person, and I also, to alleviate some of the humor, like put yourself in his position and look at it with some empathy and have a bit of sympathy towards someone like this, because yes, this did happen a long time ago, but it happens nowadays. I mean,
well, sure.
You do have these people who have these grand delusions, and they fall so deep into.
No, it certainly does. That's something that hasn't changed over the years.
Mental illness is not funny, and clearly he was, as you put it, delusional. If nothing else, he was delusional, and he had the ability to convince himself. I think that part is true, sounds to be true as well. He was truly a pathological liar, in that he himself was convinced. That's the very definition of a pathological liar.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And he did convince himself that this was the truth, this was real. And there's sort of a really bittersweet romance there.
Well, there is.
Yeah, and we could laugh about it, but
rotten love, let me tell you, I'll tell you anyway. But we got about 10 minutes left of the show, so I mean, in the interest of time, how does everything start to unravel? I mean, we understand that he lived with her, he tried to bring her back to life.
Sure.
And how did things start to unravel for him?
I think more interesting than that, because we're short on time, it's not so much how. I think that the sister shows up at his door, knocks on the door, and that's the start of the film. It's where is my sister, really? And he's like,
and so it's unraveling.
She's like, just show me where. Well, she says, show me where is my sister? Just show me her in the corpse, and I'll be fine. And he says, you don't have to do that. She's here with me, and she does. She does, and what I love about it is she does what nobody in Hollywood films does. She's like, okay, sounds great, see you later, and runs for the hills and just goes to the police, and she doesn't like, you madman, you crazy, she's like, oh, sure, thank you for showing me, and just leaves. And it becomes a media sensation. But the most bizarre aspect of the story is the favor on his behalf. Everybody comes to his aid. It's just unanimous that this man was just such a romantic hero, and he who should be revered. Scientists write in and say this is all too common in science, where you try and admonish those who are trying to make advancements in the field of science, and all he wanted to do was prove that you can bring a human body back to life. He should not only be absolved from his crimes, but given the body back.
Did it say sincerely Dr. Frankenstein at the end?
Well, I mean, he's kind of this real life Dr. Frankenstein. But what of Elena? They take her body and they put her on display. She becomes this kind of oddity, and the funeral home charges $1 per head, and thousands of people come and take pictures with her.
Wow. Yeah, posing with her. Hey.
So two different fates. I mean, he gets this kind of royal, what would you call it? Like this cheer.
Okay.
She gets put on display.
But at least he didn't exploit her like they did.
Exactly. Public. Well, and all he wanted was her back. And, and at the end of the trial, when they said, you know what, you're free to go, statute of limitations and whatever.
Sure. I mean, I get it because, I mean, we're all married men. I mean, you know what I mean? We all love our wives and my gosh, you know, and the thought of losing someone you deeply, deeply love is just, even the thought of it's a painful thing.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I do have that, in that regard, I do have sympathy for him. Of not being able to let go of his love, not being able to, and really at its heart, it's mental illness, of course, but it's also deep down inside, it's a love story, you know, that just beyond the grave kind of love story, oddly enough, beyond her grave anyway.
Ronnie, I do have a very serious question. So, what are you envisioning the tone of the film? What is the overarching tone for you of the film?
If I could put it in a way that, you know, anyone can understand, I want it to feel like a dream. I want it to feel like this kind of languid, cloudy, weird dream, because I think that's what the story is, because it isn't, dreams don't necessarily follow any sort of, you know, realistic path. You know, if you took John Waters, David Lynch, and Tim Burton and meshed their films all together, that's what I'd like this to be.
Okay.
You know, like, this kind of transgressive, surrealistic, quirky melodrama.
Sure. Well, how, you know, and that's really just that vision you're putting in my head. That would be a very, very interesting film to watch. And I really want to see this thing get made. So everyone, of course, that's listening, go to Kickstarter and even if it's $5, donate it, because it will be definitely worth seeing this thing hit the screen. And it'll be interesting to see your take, especially the puppetry that you're going to bring to it, because that'll bring kind of eerie. It actually make it more eerie.
That was one other thing, Ronnie, I wanted to get to is you have a really interesting group of people involved. Why don't you let the listeners know about the people involved with the film?
Oh, sure. Well, that's, you know, Robin, who's doing all the puppets, you know, is an award-winning puppeteer. She did this film called The Pigeoning about a guy who becomes convinced that the pigeons are kind of revolting, and not a film, a play about a puppet play about films revolting and their conspiracy theories that the pigeons kind of are gonna end the world.
Wow.
And it's always, I mean, it's a perfect match for this.
Yeah.
And my close collaborator Shane Morton, who just finished Frankenstein, created Bikers. And he also did Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell on Adult Swim, and the effects for the very viral Too Many Cooks skit from Adult Swim. And Stephen Coates, who is my composer and I've always been, you know, working with, but mostly the Morbid Anatomy Museum, obviously, in Brooklyn, New York, who I've been doing all my films through for about 7 years, and we've been constant collaborators. And if you are in New York and you're listening, come check us out and buy everything in the store. But we're like a band. We're less like filmmakers and more like a rock group.
and that's nice to hear. I mean, you know, that's just not the stale Hollywood way of doing things.
No, not at all. We don't
you know,
have that kind of money.
Yeah, well, you know, and well, before we forget, where do they find the Count dead? I mean, obviously he died. He died in 1952 at age 75.
Sure.
How? Oh, go ahead, sir.
Full circle to your death mask. So he had being separated from the corpse, a bitter man. He dies years later. I think it was 15 years later, next to a recreated corpse. It should be known that his wife was looking after him. His actual wife was looking after him at the time and making sure he was okay. A dedicated German wife. But he dies with her and the death mask that he had once created as the face of the figure next to him.
And his wife was completely okay that he's laying there with a dead girl? Her mask, anyway?
It goes so much further, guys. It's, you know, he had 2 kids. One of them was dying and died.
Wow.
He didn't even bother to go. And it's a wacky story. I mean, I touched on a lot of stuff. I didn't even touch on the big explosion because we didn't have time.
Yeah. Just, it's wow. I mean, of course, you could find more about this story on the internet, but I really, really do urge everybody to go to the Kickstart page and watch your short video you have there, because it really explains how you'd be making this film. And everybody donate, like even if it is like $5-10, kick it your way. Let's see this thing hit the screen, because I really think it's going to be a great film. I really, really do. And
fascinating.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, and your other works are equally fascinating. So I know this will be just as fascinating, if not more so.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much, man. This has been a blast.
Oh yeah, I mean, anytime we could talk about necrophiliacs and counts and Bigfoots all in the same show, I mean, we're in hog heaven with that. But this story though, do you as a filmmaker, and this is in closing, do you ever get squeamish reading this journal? Do you ever go, oh my God, that's disgusting?
No. I'm an empath. I always try and put myself in the author's mindset and in their position. And I just take it for what it's worth. And if you're telling me a story and you're not skeeved out by it, then I'm not going to be. I think that's an artist's responsibility to hear it from your own perspective.
Very well said. Very well said.
Thank you.
And, do you have a website, Ronnie, of your very, very own, in case people want to look at your other works?
I do. It's Antix, ANTIX, NYC.com.
So everyone go check that out as well, after you check out the Kickstarter, of course. Because you got one called The Man That Married Cats.
Man That Married Kittens.
Kittens, sorry. I knew I'd murder that at the end. No pun intended with our story. But
Another historical oddball,
Yeah, and we could tackle that story someday as well. But Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we really enjoyed talking about this. And I know we made light of it, folks, and of course we have to in this light, but it really is a deep tale of mental illness as well as love. And like I said, to learn more information, go to the Kickstarter page, donate a few bucks, and let's get this film made. That being said, I want to thank you again, Ronnie, for coming on here with us. And
thank you guys
Eric,
so much.
Thank you for being the co-host yet again.
Oh, yeah,
of course.
what a ball.
And,
great show.
And everyone else that's listening and making us as successful as we are, we want to thank you guys too, because if it weren't for you, we wouldn't be here. That being said, love each other, take care of each other, and stay away from those dead bodies.
Thank you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.